What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Stardust here. Welcome back to another video here on the YouTube channel, and this one is probably one of the weirdest ones that we've had when it comes to game development updates and all that good stuff, as we start talking a bunch of food analogies and stuff gets kind of confusing, but hopefully if you can follow along then you will get a little bit of information out of this. So, in the last thing that I did involving CD Nikki, there was a discussion about someone asking, is there going to be any content after Jane Foster? Now, CD Nikki never actually responded to this, resulting in a lot of people assuming that Jane Foster would be the last content piece of Marvel's Avengers. CD Nikki did eventually respond, as you can see here, saying, as much as a Reddit nerd as I am, I'm not in fact on here 24/7. Yes, there are plans for content after 2.5. No, there aren't any current plans to sunset support for the game, and as you guessed, I'm not going into any specifics. I expect we'll pull the curtain back on the next chunk of the plan after 2.5 when we come back after 2.4 to talk details about Jane Foster. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. So a little bit of kind of extra reassurance if you did believe that the game was going to sunset support. Obviously, you could also say that we were told there was going to be a roadmap, and then there wasn't. So, you know, at the moment, trust does need to be built up a little bit again with these sort of development updates, but I have no reason to believe that they're lying, because if they were going to sunset support, they wouldn't mention it at all in, you know, comments like this. So, at least we know when we'll be receiving more details about the future of Marvel's Avengers and all that good stuff. So, on to the next thing. So, Blue23454 asks, understandably you can't say much, and understandably you want us to speculate less of small bits of information. However, if you can answer, I have just two questions. One, you said 2.4 would be the last update this year for system changes, and 2.5 I understand will bring Jane Foster. Without revealing specifics, has Crystal Dynamics planned past 2.5? Obviously, we know that they have indeed. 2. The community has been speculating for several months that Jane Foster would be coming to the game, but at no point have we had concrete evidence of this. About how long ago did CD start development on Jane Foster? Now, this got a reply, yes to 1, and I don't think I'm comfortable getting into number 2, because I don't think I have a straightforward, unnuanced answer. For example, is development any work like concept art or writing lines? Is it code in a build, asset creation, etc.? And that feels like it's ripe to create misconceptions, which I can understand the point CD Nikki's making there. Then the Blue, my apologies, goes on to say, thanks for your time. Number 2 wasn't at all the answer I was looking for, but I can understand your reluctance to answer. To your point though, I would ask, at what point do you start making pie? Now this is where things get a little bit weird. Is it when you're at the grocery store and decide to buy a pie dish on a whim, just in case? Is it when you decide you're going to learn to bake a pie? Is it when you start buying pie ingredients? Or is it when you're in the kitchen assembling those ingredients with the oven warming up? I'm willing to bet most people would say you're not making a pie until you've assembled all the ingredients in the kitchen. I don't think anyone would consider concept art development or the existence of reused assets. At some point, the team decided to make Jane Foster a playable character, and maybe someone sat down and took the first steps towards making that happen. Maybe she was originally planned as an NPC, and therefore a lot of code/assets already exist for her, but I wouldn't consider working on her as an NPC development as a playable character. Her becoming a playable character doesn't retcon the reason why any reused assets exist. So this got quite a lengthy response from CD Nikki, once again using the pie analogy and a bunch of other analogies, and it does get a little confusing, but hopefully you guys can kind of understand what CD Nikki's putting down here. So he says, my apologies, there's a bit of an ending there, talking about eggs and stuff like that. If you're cooking an omelette and end up making scrambled eggs, you didn't start making scrambled eggs until you ruin the omelette. Like I said, this is weird, right? This is totally weird, so I completely forgot there was this little ending section. But anyway, CD Nikki does eventually respond to this by saying, alright, so this is a bit of a long comment here, because I enjoy talking about this stuff, but I will TLDR up front that I'm still not going to provide a timeline for the work process, so you can skip this if you're hoping there's Jane was started on X date at the end. The pie analogy causes some problems, because it implies we have a recipe for what we're making when we start. The best analogy I've come across for game dev has been, and apologise because it's a bit grandiose, but it's so useful I still deploy it, Kennedy declaring we'd go to the moon. That was a goal that not only required things to be built, but for problems to be discovered and new technologies built to solve them. The path from decision to execution is long and largely unknown at the start. Nick then goes on to say, going back to the pie analogy, for some reason, if you're the first person to invent pie, then the process kind of does go back all the way to things like what do I cook in it and what ingredients do I buy. This won't be our first hero, so perhaps we don't start that far back. Perhaps a new hero is more like inventing a new flavour of pie, in which case we still have ambiguity, like do we count all the test bakes we made before figuring out the right recipe as baking a pie? There's not really a right or wrong answer, because it's not really possible to simply say a time without a list of caveats like. Even baking itself is rarely that simple. If you say how long does it take to make a pie, do you mean bake time or prep and bake time? Do you could all the prep time, I don't know, I'm guessing it means count all the prep time, or just the active prep time and exclude time waiting around for things like dough proving, etc, etc. As I told you, when it comes to like being really obvious with what they're talking about, this sort of stuff gets really difficult, but I think if you could get around the pie analogy, there is like a method to this, so I wanted to talk about it regardless. This is even further complicated because pie from scratch, unlike game dev, is a pretty linear activity. One person starts and they stop when pie making is done, but game dev gets done by multiple people who don't necessarily work simultaneously. Trying to translate that to the pie example, if you use pre-made frozen crust, where do you start counting? When you start cooking at home, or when some guy in a factory began making the crust a month ago. Combining raw ingredients feels pretty core to cooking after all, and that's what the guy in the factory is doing. Do we count the time the frozen pie crust sat on a supermarket shelf when neither you nor the guy in the factory are making any pie progress? I'm genuinely not trying to be cagey, but game development, especially AAA game development with a large multifunctional team, is complicated and doesn't lend itself well to simple questions. And then we go right straight back to the start. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. So that was kind of the little tidbit we got. Now, obviously, it's good reassurance to know that Jane isn't a final content piece and there's no current plans to sunset support, and that we will be receiving probably more information about future updates after 2.4. The pie analogy, again, take it as you can, you know, talk about sort of like the kind of weird roundabout way. Obviously they weren't happy to talk about Jane Foster's timeline of development, which I guess is fine, but like I don't see why not necessarily. I don't see sort of like the issue with that. But again, you know, it was a weird way to put it to begin with, and I think that the person trying to ask the question probably should have left the pie analogy alone, because it doesn't, because I mean we got like what, like 4 paragraphs worth of just talking about pie without really, like, you know, talking about anything, if you know what I mean. But anyway, guys, that is the news video for today. I did do a shorts recently talking about Spider-Man PS1 developer wanting to do a remaster. It's not doing very well in view sense, which, I mean, shorts kind of have their own algorithm. I get it. But if you want to help boost it, then feel free to go and watch it. I would leave the link down below in the comments as a pinned thing. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in a bit. Peace.